Let's get to our next guest. Amanda Manier joins us for the first time. She is a veterans advocate. She's a lawyer and, in fact, a supervising attorney for the Veterans Law Group and has been with that organization for some period of time, going back about 7 years or so. She's dogged in a variety of areas important to veterans and perhaps also those that are affecting you out in the audience. So we thought it'd be great to have her aboard. Amanda, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your journey in terms of how you came upon it, and more specifically, what it was that led to the concentration in your practice toward that end.
Sure, absolutely. I grew up in a family that was very much respected the military. My mom kind of taught us that it was our responsibility as civilians to support our military while they're overseas. So we were always sending care packages and that kind of thing. And then living in San Diego, which is where we're based out of, there's a lot of veterans here. And so you become friends with a lot of them. And as Iraq and Afghanistan started happening after 9/11, I just had many friends and people that I knew that were struggling with the VA, struggling with PTSD when they came back from overseas. And I learned that that was one of the ways in which I could leverage my advocacy skills to help them battle with the VA and the bureaucracy there. So that's what I spend my time doing.
You know, I will say, man, I'm an attorney as well. The concept of concentrating that specifically might be considered by some to be a niche, if you will. I don't buy that. I think it is, while it is a specific area, there are pension lawyers, there are people that are, you know, into any number of specific areas. And I would argue that there's such a need. You hit the mental health issue, which is obviously important. There's a jailing issue, which is important. There is an employment issue, which is important. I could go on, and
Yeah.
I don't look at it as being something that is small. I look at it as being concentrated, but very large.
Yeah, absolutely. There is not a lack of need. That is for sure. I spend a lot of my time helping with all of those areas in which you just talked about. A large portion of the clients that I work with, not only in our firm, but that I work with personally, are PTSD or what is called MST cases, military sexual trauma, which is categorized under PTSD, and helping them with their benefits process. I also spend a bit of time with incarcerated veterans. We actually go out and visit in our local area here across California. And hopefully once COVID is done, we'll be able to get out to Texas as our next area to go visit incarcerated veterans that are kind of forgotten by the process. I call them the forgotten veterans because they kind of lose their ability to pick up the phone and call the VA or call a veteran service officer or somebody to help them. And joblessness is the majority of our cases as well, are people who are severe enough in their mental health or orthopedic issues or Agent Orange issues that they're no longer able to provide for their families. So I take it as a personal mission to help them get what they deserve, what was part of their contract, what they, sacrificed their own lives and their own benefits, their own livelihood by getting these injuries, and it's my job to help them to be able to get what they're entitled to.
Your materials indicate as well the Bureau of Justice Statistics estimates there are about 180,000 U.S. veterans in our prisons and jails. So once again, there's a plentiful number there to focus on it. You mentioned COVID. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the impact of the pandemic on veterans and how people could help, or what type of help would be available. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a number of them. One of the things I point out that is something that a lot of people don't even think about is the issue of us having to wear masks. That in a lot of cases is very triggering to people with PTSD because they can't see somebody's face. And then those that came from Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of the people over there did wear face coverings all the time. So it becomes a bit of a trigger to them. So just being cognizant of that. In addition to that, the people who are subject of a sexual assault, that MST I mentioned, to have something over their face, and for us as the public to require them to do it. In a lot of cities, the mask issue, there is an exception for people who have mental health issues or respiratory issues. So being cognizant of that somebody not wearing a mask doesn't necessarily mean they're just refusing to. It could be something to do with their mental health or their physical health. So that's affected it a lot. And then as well, the VA has just been unable in a lot of cases to do examinations and to proceed with the process to get the veteran a benefit. Examinations are required in order to prove that they have a medical condition. And so COVID has slowed that process down a lot as well. So you've got veterans out there that are often unemployed and can't get the benefits that they need through the VA just because of logistics.
Mm-hmm. We are across the country from each other pretty much, but you can go to veteranslaw.com and you could learn a lot about what Amanda's talking about, the issues and what forms of relief that perhaps would be applicable to you or a loved one or a friend, and obviously a wide spectrum of topics. And you'd mentioned the inability to work, and that can come from obviously any number of different areas. The support necessary that is available, though, for that, again, can you drill down just a little bit on that?
Sure. The VA actually has a benefit that is called TDIU, Total Disability Based on Individual Unemployability. It essentially means that if a veteran is unemployed because of their disabilities related to their service, the VA will compensate that at 100% disability rate. So some veterans or their families don't even know that that benefit exists. It's not something the VA necessarily advertises to them. And those kind of things that affect ability to work, they could be diabetes related. They could be, a lot of them that I work with, again, are mental health related. They get to a point that, stressful circumstances like a work environment, being around people sometimes, being afraid to be around men if there was a sexual assault. And then orthopedic back injuries that affect your ability to lift. Maybe you've done manual labor your entire life or some sort of, blue collar job, and you have a back injury because of your service and you can't do what you used to be able to do. The VA offers a rehabilitation program, but in addition to that, they also offer unemployability through the VA. So if it's something that you're struggling to provide for your family, there's a benefit that's available to that, and we can certainly help you look into it, see if it's something that you would qualify for and if it's something you want to pursue. In addition, it's not necessarily a permanent thing if you don't want it to be. Maybe it's just a stopgap while you go to school to get a different type of job that you could do with the injuries that you have.
I really admire you. I truly do. Picking this up and making not only a practice out of it and a business out of it, but a passion out of it. And we're going to come back and have a couple more areas we want to get to, including a little bit more on the VA. That'll be right here on Night Talk in just 2 minutes. There's a lot to sift through when we talk about the veterans. This is very clear to us, I think, generally, and certainly when we put the spotlight on it as we are tonight with Amanda Manier, who's a veterans advocate and also attorney. Something that perhaps a lot of folks didn't really get the opportunity to get through in the last day or two, in some respects, just because of how crazy every day is the $2.2 trillion COVID-19 relief package that was just, I think, unveiled by the House yesterday. Again, $2.2 billion of that for the Department of Defense and Military Services, and then more to Veterans Affairs. I'm not asking you to rip apart that level of legislation, but to the extent you're familiar with it, is that a step in the right direction?
I'm going to try to curb my cynicism a little bit from the VA. I look at, they've made a lot of changes over the last couple of years. Certainly a lot of the emphasis in the healthcare region, which is, from my understanding, from the feedback that I get, from an increase in the satisfaction of healthcare has gotten better. I don't work in that area. I can't really advocate for people to get their healthcare. And so that's where the benefit is, or where the improvement has happened over the last couple of years. There's been a lot of changes in the claims process that has made things a lot more complicated, that I feel like they're kind of, if that's where they're throwing the money at, they're throwing it out after, there's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done, and people doing their jobs better and being more cognizant and being supportive of, more interested in doing their job well, that I don't know that throwing money at it is an issue. But there has been money that's been put in, like the Veterans Experience Office. That's a whole new office that's been developed over the last number of years. I think 3 or 4 years it's been in place, where it's the veterans can call and they talk to somebody who's right out of the White House, and they have direct communication. And I've seen some good improvement in those areas. But I kind of shrug my shoulders a little bit when you're throwing money after problems instead of fixing a problem you could fix in the private.
That's the second time you used that phrase, and frankly, it was running through my mind as well. So The distance is not getting in the way of our telepathic thoughts, and that is, I think we've all learned that lesson, that you just don't throw money at anything really anymore. You just have to have plans and organization and run the institutions and do it in the best standards that you can and need to do and legally required to do. And the money is obviously not a bad thing, but it's not in and of itself the solution. It should be a means to an end in some respects. Let's talk a little bit about what happens if you get your VA disability denied.
Sure. The area in which I work in is an appeal. So somebody has to have a decision from the VA in order for me to help them out. And that can even be a denial or what we call underrated. So you may get a service connection for, say, PTSD, but they only rate you at 10% disabled. And if you're having difficulty with working or you're having difficulty kind of with severe depression, that kind of thing, you should be rated at a higher, maybe 50 or 70%. So it's not just a denial. In addition, you could be denied, completely denied, saying, we work with cases all the time, those MST cases I mentioned, where there was a sexual assault that happened during service, but it was not reported. Common thing, not reported to your superiors. And then they deny, the VA later denies your case saying you didn't report anything. So that would be a straight out denial that we would want to fight, to be able to show that they're in an MST environment, you're showing there was a change in behavior from the time that this person, this man or woman, MST cases can happen with men or women, that from the time it happened, there was a change in behavior. Maybe their performance went down. Maybe they went AWOL and left for a while. So there's ways in which you can show those things. And that's where having a good advocate, like a law firm like ours or a veteran service organization, can walk alongside the veteran because they know, based upon the law and experience, what the VA needs to be told in order to grant the case.
You've introduced a lot of us to MST tonight, and I'd like you to maybe expound on that just a bit. And here's why I say that. I'm interested in how big of a problem it is. I don't know how to quantify it. This is the first time you and I have ever talked, and I don't know exactly what term to use. But the reason I bring that up is, A, it's terribly troubling. Like you said, it could affect women and men. Number two, we see the most grotesque examples on the headlines periodically. But I certainly would not believe that that's reflective of the overall scale. But what is the scale, and to a certain extent, can you characterize the depth of that problem?
Yeah, I believe that, and the VA qualifies it and rates it under PTSD. So they basically say you have post-traumatic stress disorder because of a military sexual trauma. One of the biggest misconceptions is we automatically think if somebody was in the military and they were sexually assaulted, it must have been from somebody else in the military. And that's just not true. MST can be rated if you were sexually assaulted by a civilian during the time that you're in the military. That's the way that the VA looks at it. If you were injured in any way, shape, or form while you were under contract and in the service, then they will compensate you for that. So I want to address the fact that it's not always somebody who's a fellow soldier, but in a lot of cases it is. And in those circumstances, they're more commonly not reported, because you may be reporting on a fellow soldier, a superior officer, which makes it a lot more complicated. And they're used to going up the chain of command. So it is so often not reported. There's statistics out there that are kind of all over the place. And part of the problem is because they're not reported, then their statistics are a little bit skewed. So the last statistics I looked at, they were saying these were people who went to the VA healthcare to get healthcare and reported that they had an MST while in service. And if I remember correctly, it was right around about 1 of every 4 women and then 4 out of every 10 men. And again, those are only reported cases after the fact. So I try to stay in the lane of helping the people that are in front of me and being in an advocacy standpoint to educate the public and educate other veterans out there that there is help for those things. And the VA has raised the consciousness of it. They do a lot more counseling. They do a lot more of handling it with careful gloves. But when they're coming to me and they've been denied, and especially at the level of appeal where most of my cases are, they've been told by the VA at least twice, we don't believe you. And that's the way I look at it. And that's why I have such a heart for it, is that these are people who served our country. They were not only put their life on the line, but also had this happen to them while they were serving our country. And I just don't, I feel like the VA should err on the side of granting those cases when there's a benefit of the doubt, and they're supposed to. But I end up with a lot of people in my office that just maybe they just don't know how to talk about it, so they don't know what to say to the VA to get their case granted.
Well, that's always a big issue. It's always a big issue whether you're talking about physical or mental abuse. I don't know what, like you said earlier, do I report something? We know what the rules are on that, quote unquote. We know what, the statistics reflect on that. We know the reality of that. We've talked about unemployment, loneliness, and the impact on veterans. And, there's one other thing, and I only have literally about a minute to go on this segment. But you said something about the masks and the masks being a trigger. I never thought about that. This is one of the reasons I love doing this work, is you learn so much. How do you balance, or how is it balanced between people who need to wear a mask, but people who are traumatized by even seeing a mask? And I only have literally about a minute.
Right, absolutely. And my perspective is just to try to educate the public that just because you see somebody not wearing a mask doesn't mean they're just trying to be defiant and say, I don't believe in wearing masks. It could be somebody, military or not, veteran or not, that has a mental health issue or asthma issues that can't be wearing a mask. And so I look at, like, I can take care of myself and I can be compassionate and understanding about other people. And we're just not going to live in an environment where everybody's going to be okay with wearing a mask, or everybody's not going to be okay with it. But to be understanding that that could have triggers. And part of it turns into people with PTSD. They just don't go out. They just stay home then.
But there we go. There's the loneliness that, we know people that are, quote, perfectly healthy, as if that person exists, is, affected by the pandemic, lockdowns, loneliness being a big part of it. I absolutely enjoyed the conversation, Amanda. I hope the need comes about, or the interest for us to do it again. And you're an excellent interview. It was very, very, very well thought out. I'm glad we did this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. Once again, veteranslaw.com, where you can find Amanda and her practice and perhaps some issues that could be relevant to you.